Yesterday, when we read the first part of Wilma Unlimited, we learned that Wilma had this huge family, and times were a little bit rough in Tennessee. We learned that when she was little, she would always get every sickness, but like a little bit worse than her brothers and sisters because she was born early and tiny, but luckily her mom had a lot of home remedies that would always help her. But then she got that sickness, polio, and she couldn't help her. We learned that she finally got to go to school, but she was sad because the kids would make fun of her brace and she just wanted to be with them. Remember, she grew up here in Tennessee in the South in the 1940s. We learned yesterday that she had this brace, and now you're probably, hopefully thinking to yourself, okay, how does she become this Olympic runner, one of the fastest women in the world? We learned that she does get to go to the Olympics, so she's over here in Tennessee. She goes all the way over to Europe, to Italy, and she was invited to be on the Olympic team here in Rome, Italy, for the Olympic Games. And as we read today, we'll learn a little bit more about that. So here she is yesterday, kind of being at school and being happy, but then realizing it's actually sad. This next section that we read today will kind of keep telling us about some of the struggles that Wilma had to go through in her life and how she had to overcome them. Remember, this is her brace she had to wear because of the polio. On Sunday, on her way to church, Wilma felt especially good. She and her family had always found strength in their faith, and church was Wilma's favorite place in the world. Faith means like your religion and kind of what you believe. Everyone she knew would be there, talking and laughing, praying and singing. It would be just the place to try the bravest thing that she has ever done. Anybody getting an idea here? The bravest thing she's ever done. She hung back while people filled the old building. If you hang back, that kind of means you let the crowd go in front of you. Standing alone, the sound of the hymns coloring the air, she unbuckled her heavy brace and set it by the church's front door. Taking a deep breath, she moved one foot in front of the other, her knees trembling violently. She took her mind off of her knees by concentrating on taking another breath. Concentrating meaning you're focusing on taking another breath and then another. This does not surprise me because we learned yesterday she always did her exercises. Always did her exercises. Here she is walking down the aisle at church. Choir singing up front. She looks like she's concentrating. Whispers rippled through the gathering. Wilma Rudolph was walking? Row by row, heads turned toward her as she walked alone down the aisle. She's looking pretty confident. Her large family, all her family's friends, everyone from school, each person stared wide-eyed. The singing never stopped. It seemed to burst right through the walls and into the trees. Finally, Wilma reached a seat in the front and began singing too, her smile triumphant. Triumphant's kind of like another word for victory, so she's smiling with a victory, as we can see. Wilma practiced walking as often as she could after that, and when she was 12 years old, she was able to take that brace off for good. She and her mother realized she could get along without it. So one memorable day, memorable meaning a day you'll never forget, they wrapped that hated brace in a box and mailed it back to the hospital. As soon as Wilma sent that box away, she knew her life was beginning all over again. It's stop and think to yourself, what does that mean? Her life was beginning all over again. Here we'll now read about how her life has been able to change and start over. After years of sitting on the sidelines, Wilma couldn't wait to throw herself into basketball, the game she had most liked to watch. She was skinny, but no longer tiny. Her long legs would propel her across the court, meaning push her, and through the air, and she knew all the rules and all the moves. Remember, we learned yesterday that when she was watching them play, she would memorize their moves. So now she can just go in and do it. In high school, she led her team to one victory after another, and eventually she took the team all the way to the Tennessee State Championships. There, to everyone's astonishment, her team lost. Here we are at her games. Wilma had become accustomed to winning. It means like she's used to it. Now she slumped on the bench, all the liveliness knocked out of her. Remember, when you slump down, you kind of are sitting and slouching. All the liveliness knocked out of her. But at the game that day was a college coach. He admired Wilma's basketball playing, but was especially impressed by the way she could run. He wanted her for his track and field team. With his help, Wilma won a full athletic scholarship to Tennessee State University. A full athletic scholarship means you get to go to college for free because you're an athlete on their team. And she was the very first member of her family to go to college. This next section we're going to read kind of shows us what she was able to do now that she went to play or to run track at her college. 8 years after she mailed her brace away, Wilma's long legs and years of hard work carried her thousands of miles from Clarksville, Tennessee. The summer of 1960, she arrived in Rome, Italy, to represent the United States at the Olympic Games as a runner. The Olympic Games are where everybody in the whole world comes to compete. Just participating in the Olympics was a deeply personal victory for Wilma, but her chances of winning a race were limited. Simply walking in Rome's shimmering heat was a chore, and athletes from other countries had run faster races than Wilma ever had. Women weren't thought to run very well anyways. Track and field was considered a sport for men, and the pressure from the public was intense. For the first time ever, the Olympics was now going to be shown on television, and all the athletes knew that more than 100 million people would be watching. Worst of all, Wilma had twisted her ankle just after she arrived in Rome. Oh no. It was swollen and painful on the day of her very first race. Okay, that's where we're going to stop today. You can go fill out your double entry journal telling 3 new things you learned about Wilma and 3 questions you're now wondering that the book did not answer yet.